Tell me something good.
What's going on, y'all? I'd like to welcome you back to yet another JavaScript and jQuery tutorial. You're in the lab with your boy Nick and Sekou Technologies. And today I'm about to tell you something really good. I'm about to tell you all about functions. Conjunction junction. What's your function, y'all? No, honestly, I'm going to tell you something good about functions. Functions are probably going to be one of the main pieces of programming code that you write. It is going to make your life as a programmer that much easier. I don't want to call it the bloodline. However, it's definitely a blood vessel to your program. Without further ado, let's jump right in. So, what's your function? Functions let you group a series of statements together to perform a specific task. If different parts of a script repeat the same task, you can reuse the function rather than repeating the same set of statements. So think about it. We have this huge program. Within this program, we might need to refer to certain statements multiple times. Well, when I need to call those statements, I don't want to have to write them 5, 10, 20, 150, 200, 1,000 times, however many. Rather, I can use a function and wrap these statements into that function, and now all I have to do is call that function one particular time or multiple times. I don't have to actually write the full-blown statement. Think about it like this. You have multiple statements. Multiple statements go into one function, and you call the function multiple times. Makes it really easy to organize your code. It makes your code much more simple to read, and it's just easier to do. It's best practice. Not only do functions help you organize your code, they also store the steps needed to achieve a particular task. Remember, your programming code is nothing more than the schematic and the recipe that you want the computer to complete. Your script can then ask the function to perform all of those steps and when they are required. So think about it like this. Not only do we want to call this particular function, but we might want to call it at a particular time. We invoke all of that within our function. Think about it like this. What if we have a button within our HTML page, within our website? Perhaps whenever a user clicks on that button, we might want it to play some type of music. We might want it to show a video. We might want a pop-up box to appear. All of this can be done within our function. Chances are also we're going to need to call this function multiple times. Well, why? Because if a user clicks on another button and we want the music to play, or another video and we want it to play, once again, we don't want to have to write out the full-blown statement in all of the programming code that many times. I mean, you've been to music websites. Some of them have tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of songs. That's where functions come into play. Whenever you go to these websites, the individual that wrote that program is using nothing more than a function to play all of those songs or show all of those videos. They're just calling that function multiple times. So, some functions need to be provided with information in order to achieve a given task. For example, what if we want our function to calculate the area of a wall or the area of multiple walls? Perhaps we want to calculate the area of every wall in a particular building. Well, I don't want to have to go through my code and constantly type out width times height, width times height, width times height. I just want to create a function that's called getArea. My statement is going to contain the width times the height. And now all I have to do is pass through the parameters that contain the width and the height, and it'll automatically calculate the area for me. Makes it way easier. Makes it way easier. So, before we actually get down to the nitty-gritty and write out some functions, what properties do functions have? Well, every single function has a name, and all the name does is describe what the function does. Your function should always have a name that has to do with what that function does. For example, you don't want to create a function that has to do with food and name it, I don't know, steps for building a house. It just theoretically does not make sense. It is not best practice. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. Also, we have statements, and remember the statements are the steps that the function needs to perform in order to perform its overall goal. We also have parameters, and we're going to take a look at parameters a bit more, but these are nothing more than the pieces of information passed to a function. Remember, width and height if we have a function that's called area, and I'll show you that in just a sec. And also, whenever we write a function, we expect it to provide us with a given answer, right? And this answer that our function gives us is going to be called the return value. Everybody say it with me. Return value. Sounds great. Kind of off key, but it sounds great. So without further ado, let's go on ahead and jump into our text editor and let's write out our first function. So the function that we're going to do today is very, very simple. It's going to do nothing more than tell the user hello whenever we run our web page. So you go to the website. As soon as you go to it, this function is going to trigger and it's going to show hello at the top in an alert box. So let's figure out how to do that. Remember, the first thing we do is give our function a name. However, first, before we give it a name, we have to write out what's called the function keyword. Just like we did with variables. We wrote the variable keyword and then we provided the variable with its name. Well, it's going to be the same thing in this case. We write out function and we give it its name. And since this function is going to say hello, then we'll just call it say hello. Next, we're going to have to open up code blocks. And you remember those code blocks that I introduced you to in those earlier videos where we're going to revisit them within these functions. And now we're going to begin to see why these code blocks are so foundational throughout our life as programmers. And within these code blocks, this is going to be where our statements live, okay? What we actually want the function to do. So in this case, we just want the function to alert the user hello. So I use my alert method. I pass through the hello string. I end it with my semicolon. And great, you have just created your first function. We have the function keyword, we have the function name, and we also have the code block that contains the statements. Now, how do we actually get this say hello function to run? Well, all we do is call the say hello name. So there it is. It doesn't have any parameters. We save it. And as you can see, as soon as we save it, I already had my HTML document up, but it ran and it triggered the hello alert box that you see at the top of the screen. I'll do that one more time for you guys. Okay. So we called our function. We're going to hop back over to our HTML page. And if you don't have this open, remember, shame on you. It's class number 8. Go to the website, download it, get it all up and running. And if yours doesn't run, make sure that you are referencing our class 8 functions JavaScript sheet. Yours might not be blank, but go on ahead and make it blank. Or if you just want to generate a new JavaScript document, do that. But make sure you are referencing the name within your HTML document so everything can show and everything can run. Okay, so at that point, once you have everything set up and connected, we come up here, we run the live preview. And whenever we go into Chrome and the web browser launches, you're going to see that it tells us hello. Pretty neat, right? Well, you might be thinking, Nick, I mean, this is just way too elementary. I mean, I'm so much better than this. I mean, can we do something that's a tad bit more difficult? Well, this is going to be step 2 of the functions that we write today. And all we're going to do is attempt to get a single value out of our function. This is going to be where we do the area, and we're going to pass through the width, and we're also going to pass through our height. So keep in mind, some functions return information to code that called them. For example, when we perform a calculation, we are going to want a result that is returned to us. So since this particular function is going to calculate the area, once again, in the same fashion, we're going to type out the function keyword. The name of this function is going to be called getArea. And now I'm going to introduce something a little bit new to you, okay? These are going to be those parameters that we just talked about. Well, what are the parameters that you need in order to get the area? Well, you need the width and you also need the height. So what do? We type out width and we type out height. So we jump out of those parameters. We open up our code blocks. And now in order to get the area, we're going to need to invoke a variable that's called what? Area. So let's do it. Var area is equal to width times height. And what do we want this function to return? What value do we want this function to return? Remember, we want it to return the area. So we're just going to have it return our area variable that we just created. Great. This looks amazing, you guys. I like this. I like this. I like this. Well, how do we call it? This is the fun part. We're going to say get area 3, 5. Let's pause right there. Let's try to understand what the heck it was that we just did. Well, we introduced arguments. When the function below is called, the number 3 is going to be used for the width of the wall, and 5 is going to be used as the height, right? So 3 is going to be the width, 5 is going to be the height. And that's all we do to pass through parameters. Makes perfect sense, really easy to do, really easy. So let's see how we can actually get it to show. Well, we come down, we say var wall is equal to the getArea function with the parameters of 3 and 5. So what do you expect this value to be whenever we alert wall, or the value for wall? We expect it to be what? 15 probably. So let's go on ahead and run it. And after our hello alert, we should get an alert that says 15. And that's exactly what we get. Great. Wonderful. Magic. You guys are going to be the best programmers in the history of programming. I guarantee it. You're going to like the way you look. That's actually for Men's Warehouse, and I really hope they don't sue me. All right. So we have 2 great functions on our screen right now. Let's comment these functions out because we are about to create the granddaddy of them all. Okay? The function that we're about to create right now is actually going to utilize our beautiful art store. And what's going to happen is whenever a user clicks on the add to cart button, this wasn't in previous videos, but now we have an add to cart button. Whenever individuals click on this add to cart button, it's going to update the number of items within the user's cart. It's also going to provide us with a message. And then there's going to be two buttons on there. Whenever we click on one of those buttons, we want the pop-up box to close. Okay, so we're doing a couple of things. It sounds, a little bit difficult, but I guarantee it's really easy because you all are great programmers. So let's see how we do it. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to create a variable that contains the number of items that are in our shopping cart whenever we first start. So whenever you first go to a website and you want to buy something, you don't have any items in your cart. Same thing in this case. The number of items in the cart is going to start with 0. Okay? So next, all we do now is create our first function. And this first function is going to be what updates the number of items within that cart, right? And it's also going to be the one that displays the pop-up box whenever we click on the add to cart button that's in our HTML document. So we're going to write out our function keyword. The name of this function is going to be called add to cart. No parameters in this case. We open up our code blocks. And now the first statement that we're going to pass through is num items. Remember, this is the number of items that we start out with. And we're just going to increment. Remember those 2 plus signs. Increment means you're just going to add 1 to the previous number. So in this case, since the number of items that we start out with is 0, whenever we increment, when we click on this button, it's just going to go up 1. And then if we click it again, it's going to go up 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. Next, we have to create this statement for when the pop-up actually shows up as a result of clicking the button. So we do document get element by ID. And the ID that we want to pass through is called add to cart pop-up. Okay. Next, we want to go to the style property and call something that's called visibility. Okay. And this just goes into our CSS. It finds that visibility property. And right now we have the visibility property set to hidden. Well, whenever we click this button, we want our JavaScript to update that CSS and say, hey, make this pop-up box visible. So update the value from hidden to visible. Great, we have that. And now we're going to want to update the particular element that shows the number of items that we have within our cart. And we do that the same exact way in which we made the reference to our elements whenever we were working with our variables. Same way. Var L, and this element is item count. And it's going to be equal to the document object dot get element by ID. And the element in this case that we're referencing is called item count. Next, we want to update that text to actually show the number of items. Dot text content equals open quotes. We want it to say items in cart. concatenate the value for num items. Wonderful. Great. I like it. Now, we have our function for what happens whenever we add something to our cart. So let's go on ahead and run it. So I'm going to X out of this previous one. I'm going to run my HTML document. It's going to think about it. It's going to load up. And as you can see down here, we have this add to cart button. Whenever I click on it, as you can see, I get a pop-up on my screen. Wonderful. Great. This is exactly what we want. Okay, so it says item added to cart. It also says the number of items within our cart, and it's equal to 1. Great. But now, whenever I click on one of these buttons, oh snap, nothing happens. Why not? Well, that's because we haven't actually handled these buttons within our JavaScript. So let's figure out what we want these particular buttons to do as a result of clicking on them. Well, guys, we're going to create a new function. And all this function is going to do is handle the event for whenever the OK button gets clicked. So we're going to call this function OK button click. We're going to open up our code block. And remember, whenever we click on this OK button, all we want to do is have that pop-up close. Okay, we don't want it to show anymore. So rather than having the pop-up visibility equal to visible, we're just going to change it back to hidden. So we're going to pass through our document object, get element by ID. The name of this element is add to cart pop-up. Okay, we have that parameter dot style dot visibility, and now we're gonna set it equal to hidden whenever we click on this OK button. So make sure you save your JavaScript. Let's come back over to our HTML document and let's run it. And let's see if it does what we need it to do. All right, so there's Mona Lisa's beautiful face. I click add to cart. Great, it updates it. And when I click OK, it should hide it. Boom. Wonderful. You guys are great. There's no doubt in my mind that each and every one of you are at some point going to become wonderful, wonderful programmers. So let's hop back over into our PowerPoint because honestly, class is about over. But no class would be finished without a little bit of homework. So for the sake of today, I want you to continue to build out the function that we just created, okay? I want you all to update the checkout button to say remove item. So now you're going into the HTML. You're going to find the ID, or you're going to find the button that says checkout, and you're going to update the button text to say remove item. After that, I want you to create a function that not increments but decrements the number of items in the cart when this button is clicked. Capiche? If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the forum. Outside of that, you all have been a great class. My name is Nick. I told you something good. Signing out. I told you something good, y'all.